Wealth can fill a bank account, but it cannot keep a bed warm at night. Eleanor Hartwell stood at her kitchen window on Meadowbrook Ranch, watching the first light slide over the fields like a slow blade. The white fence posts ran across the land in straight lines, clean and proud, like soldiers that never moved. Once, this view had calmed her. Now it felt like the walls of a quiet cage. Eleanor was 42. 3 months earlier, her husband, Charles, had died in a riding accident that still did not feel real. One moment he had been laughing at the breakfast table, the next he was gone, and the house turned into a place where every sound echoed. The lawyers had come with careful voices and heavy folders. They told her she was set for life, cattle money, oil leases, properties in town, numbers that made people widen their eyes. But every night, Eleanor still reached across the bed in the dark and met cold sheets. That morning, the ranch was too still. The wind did not even touch the cottonwoods. Then she heard it, a dull, heavy thump on the front porch. Boots. Slow steps. Not the light walk of a neighbor. Not a delivery. Her heartbeat rose and she froze for a second, hand gripping the edge of the sink. The nearest neighbor was miles away. Eleanor did not take visitors often, not anymore. She moved closer to the lace curtain and pulled it back just enough to see. A man stood on her porch. No, not just a man. A huge man. He was so tall he had to duck a little under the porch roof. His shoulders were wide enough to block the morning sun, and for one strange second, Eleanor felt like the sky had been covered. He wore a faded denim shirt, worn jeans, and scuffed boots. His hat was bent and tired. His face looked like it had spent years fighting wind, dust, and cold. But it was his eyes that held her, green, sharp, and desperate. Eleanor's first thought was to lock the door. Her second thought was that it was already locked, and she was still alone. She opened it anyway, just a crack, keeping her hand on the frame. "Yes?" she asked. The man lifted his hat, and the motion was careful, almost respectful. Thick brown hair fell forward in a rough wave. "Ma'am," he said, voice low, "my name's Jake Sullivan. I heard about Mr. Hartwell. I'm sorry, I need work." Eleanor did not invite him in. She kept the door half closed, studying him the way you study a storm cloud. "I'm not hiring," she said. "To be honest, I've been thinking about selling the ranch." Something shifted in his face, like the floor dropped under him. He looked, for a moment, not like a giant, but like a man who had run out of places to stand. "Please, Mrs. Hartwell," he said, "I've been out of work 2 months." The Henderson ranch folded, and they let everyone go. "I can do anything. Fences, cattle, equipment. I'm strong. I don't drink. I don't cause trouble. I just need a chance." His words came fast, like he was trying to hold back panic. Eleanor noticed his hands. Big hands, rough and cracked, holding his hat so tight his knuckles looked pale. They trembled a little. This isn't just about a job, Eleanor thought. This is about survival. "Where have you been staying?" she asked before she could stop herself. Color climbed into his cheeks, a flash of shame. "In my truck," Jake said. "Sometimes the shelter in Billings when it gets too cold." The truth landed hard. Eleanor had money stacked high in banks she never visited. And here was a man built like a mountain, sleeping in a vehicle like he had no place on earth. She should have shut the door. Every sensible part of her mind warned her. Strange man. Isolated ranch, widow alone. All the stories people told. But another part of her, the part that knew what it felt like to wake up and not want to, would not let her ignore him. Jake swallowed, then did something that shocked her. He dropped to one knee right there on her porch. A giant, kneeling like a man asking for mercy. "I'm begging you," he said, voice tight. "Let me work for room and board. Half wages. Anything. I'll prove myself." Eleanor's heart pounded so hard it felt loud. She glanced out across the drive, half afraid someone would appear, just to witness this strange moment. But the road was empty, and the ranch lay quiet, like it was holding its breath with her. "Get up," she said softly, sharp with nerves. "Please." Quote, Jake rose, eyes lowered. "I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to come like that. I just don't know what else to do." Eleanor closed her eyes, and she fought herself in the dark behind her lids. She could say no. She could lock the door and never think of this again. She could keep her life safe and silent. But safety and silence were the very things that were killing her slowly. "There's a bunkhouse," she said at last. "It hasn't been used in a couple of years. It's probably dusty. You can stay there for a few days while you look for other work." Jake's head snapped up. Relief hit his face so fast it almost looked painful. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you so much. I won't be trouble, I swear it." Eleanor watched him walk away, his long steps steady, his shoulders set like he finally had direction. He headed toward the old bunkhouse at the edge of the property, past the barn and the corrals. For the first time in months, the ranch did not look completely empty. But as the door clicked shut behind her, Eleanor pressed her palm to her chest. She had just let a stranger onto her land. A man big enough to break things without trying. A man with eyes that looked like hunger and hope mixed together. And Eleanor could not shake the feeling that the quiet prison she lived in had just opened its gate, not to freedom, but to something wild she might not be able to control. The next morning, Eleanor woke before sunrise, the way she always did now. Grief had turned her into a light sleeper, like her heart never fully rested. She made coffee and stood at the same kitchen window, watching the ranch as the skies slowly changed from black to gray. Jake was already outside. He moved across the yard with a purpose that surprised her. His long arms carried a coil of rope, then a toolbox. He did not wander like someone trying to kill time. He worked like someone who had been starving and had finally been handed a meal. Eleanor told herself she would give him 3 days. Just 3. She would point him toward the bunkhouse, let him clean it up, and then send him on his way. That was the safe choice. That was the right choice. But by noon, he had already repaired a section of fence near the south pasture that had been leaning for months. By evening, the barn aisle looked cleaner than it had since Charles was alive. Jake did not talk much while he worked. He simply did the job, steady and quiet, like a man trying to repay a debt he could never fully measure. On the 3rd day, Eleanor found herself walking toward the bunkhouse with a basket of clean towels and extra blankets. She stopped before she reached the door, surprised at her own feet. She had not planned to do this. It was just that the nights were getting colder, and the old bunkhouse had thin walls. Jake opened the door before she knocked, as if he had sensed her. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, then looked at the basket and his throat bobbed. "You didn't have to." "I did," Eleanor replied. She stepped inside and took in the small space. It was plain. A narrow bed, a small table, a chair. Not much else. But it was clean, swept, ordered. Like Jake had tried to make it respectable. He watched her with careful eyes, almost like he was afraid she might change her mind at any moment. "I'm not used to kindness," he said, and the words slipped out before he could stop them. Eleanor placed the basket on the table. "I'm not used to having anyone around," she answered, and she surprised herself with how honest it sounded. For a moment, they stood in silence. Then Jake cleared his throat and stepped back, giving her space as if she might feel trapped. That night, Eleanor lay in bed and listened to the wind. For the first time in months, the quiet did not feel so sharp. Knowing another person was on the property eased something in her chest, even if she did not want to admit it. The week passed fast. Jake fixed the water pump that had been fighting her for months. He cleaned the tack room until it smelled like leather again instead of dust. He patched a leak over the barn door. He moved like he belonged there, like the ranch was finally being cared for again instead of slowly fading. And Eleanor began doing something she did not like. She watched him from the kitchen window, from the back porch, from the office when she looked up from papers. Jake was huge, but his strength was not careless. He handled gates and tools with a smooth control that made his size seem less like a threat and more like protection. One afternoon, the heat rose hard, and he pulled his denim shirt off to wipe sweat from his face. Eleanor's stomach tightened. His back and shoulders were marked by hard years, muscle built from real labor, not show. She looked away fast, but her face burned. Then the guilt came, quick and heavy. Charles had been dead only 3 months. How could she notice another man's body? How could she feel anything other than sorrow? But the truth was, sorrow did not stop a woman from being alive. On Friday evening, Jake came to the main house, hat in hand like always. Eleanor opened the door, and he stood there like he did not know where to place his hands. "Mrs. Hartwell," he said, "I wanted to thank you again. It's been a week now." "I don't want to overstay." Quote. Eleanor's chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with the thought of the ranch being empty again. "Have you found other work?" she asked. Jake's jaw flexed. He hesitated, then spoke like he hated the words. "I've tried. Every ranch within 50 miles. Most won't even see me once they hear I don't have a reference." "Why don't you have one?" Eleanor asked. Jake looked down at his boots. His voice dropped. "There was an incident at my last place," he said. "Nothing illegal. But the rancher's daughter decided she wanted me." Eleanor's stomach twisted in a way she did not expect. Jealousy, sharp and sudden, like a thorn. Jake lifted his eyes quickly. "It wasn't what it sounds like. She was married. She came after me. I turned her down. But her husband saw her trying to kiss me in the barn. It looked bad. The rancher didn't care what the truth was." "So you were fired for something you didn't do," Eleanor said. Jake let out a bitter breath. "Story of my life. Being this big, people always think the worst. They think I'm dangerous. They think I take what I want." Quote. Eleanor studied his face. For the first time, she saw the ache behind his anger. Not the anger of a violent man, but the anger of a man tired of being judged. "You don't," Eleanor said quietly. Jake's eyes flickered. "No, ma'am. My parents taught me better, before they died." The words slipped out like a broken nail. Eleanor's voice softened. "They died?" Jake nodded once. "Car crash when I was 12. Foster care after that. I bounced around, never stayed anywhere long. I got tall fast, and people didn't know what to do with me. Some were afraid, some were cruel." Eleanor felt her throat tighten. She thought of her own house, full of rooms, full of things, and yet empty in the only way that mattered. She thought of Jake sleeping in his truck. A decision formed in her before she fully understood it. "Stay," she said. Jake blinked like he misheard. "Stay and work here," Eleanor continued, more steady now. "I need help. And you need a place. I'll pay you fair wages. You can live in the bunkhouse." For a long second, Jake could not speak. Then his eyes shone, and Eleanor saw tears gather, making him look younger, softer, like the boy he had once been. "You mean it?" he asked, voice rough. "I mean it," Eleanor said. Jake swallowed hard, then nodded, like he was afraid if he moved too fast the moment would break. "Thank you," he said. "I won't let you down." As he turned to go, Eleanor watched his broad back disappear into the dusk, and fear rose in her again, but it was not fear of danger. It was fear of herself. Because she knew the truth now. Jake was not just filling a job on her ranch. He was filling the silence in her life. And once silence was gone, it was hard to bring it back. 2 months passed, and Meadowbrook Ranch began to feel alive again. Jake worked from first light to sundown, and Eleanor handled the papers, the bills, and the deals Charles once managed. They fell into a routine that felt simple, almost natural. In the evenings, Eleanor sometimes carried a plate of food to the bunkhouse, and they sat on the porch while the sky turned orange over the Montana fields. Little by little, Jake told her his story. He had lost his parents in a car accident when he was 12. Foster homes came after that, one place after another, never long enough to feel safe. He learned early that his size made people nervous. Some treated him like a threat before he ever spoke. "I always wanted one thing," he admitted one night, staring out at the land like it was a dream he did not trust. "A home. A place where I could stay, maybe a family." Eleanor watched him say it, and something in her chest pulled tight. She understood that kind of wanting. She had a big house, a full pantry, and a bank account that would never run dry. Yet she had never felt so alone. "Why haven't you had it?" she asked. Jake gave a short, bitter laugh. "It's hard to build a life when you keep getting pushed out. Women want a man who feels steady, not a man sleeping in his truck." Eleanor swallowed. The right woman would see past that. Jake turned toward her. His green eyes held her like a rope. "Would you?" The air between them changed. Eleanor's breath caught, and her cheeks warmed. She stood too fast, as if moving could hide what she felt. "I should go," she said. "Early morning." She walked back to the main house, but she could still feel his gaze on her back. When she climbed into her bed, the emptiness beside her felt louder than ever. The breaking point came on a rainy Thursday in October. Eleanor returned from town after meeting with her lawyer, her boots wet, her coat heavy. When she stepped into her kitchen, she froze. Jake stood near the sink, drenched, shivering, water dripping from his hair onto the floor. He looked miserable, like a man caught in a storm with nowhere to hide. "What happened?" Eleanor asked, rushing toward him. "The bunkhouse roof is leaking," Jake said through chattering teeth. "I've been trying to patch it, but the rain keeps coming." Eleanor grabbed a towel and pushed it into his hands. "You can't stay out there tonight. You'll get sick." "I'll be fine," Jake insisted, but he did not sound sure. "No," Eleanor said, firm. "You'll stay in the guest room." Quote. Jake hesitated, and something careful came over his face. "I don't think that's a good idea." Eleanor's voice sharpened without meaning to. "Why not?" Jake looked at her like he had been holding his breath for weeks and could not hold it anymore. "Because I'm in love with you," he said quietly. The words hit Eleanor so hard, her knees felt weak. She had seen it in the way he looked at her, in the way he listened, in the way he never crossed a line and yet stood too close sometimes. But hearing it spoken made it real in a way she could not pretend away. Jake stepped back a little, as if giving her room to run. "I know it's wrong," he said, voice shaking. "You're grieving. You're my boss. People will talk, but I can't stop it. You saw something in me when nobody else would." Eleanor's eyes stung. "This can't happen," she whispered. "Why?" Jake asked, and it was not anger, it was pain. "Because it scares you?" That was the truth, and it cut deep. Eleanor was afraid of gossip, afraid of disrespecting Charles's memory, afraid of how alive she felt around Jake. "Please leave," she said, voice breaking. Jake nodded once, like the words hurt, but he accepted them. "I'll pack in the morning." "No," Eleanor said quickly, hearing the panic in her own voice. "Don't leave the ranch, just keep your distance. We need boundaries." Jake's face tightened, and he walked out into the rain without another word. Eleanor stood in the kitchen long after the door closed, shaking, knowing that some lines, once spoken out loud, could never be erased. The next weeks were torture. Jake threw himself into work like he could bury his feelings under broken fence posts and heavy hay bales. Eleanor tried to focus on her books and contracts, but her eyes always lifted to the window, always searching for him. The ranch felt full and empty at the same time. Then Patricia arrived. Patricia was Charles's sister, dressed sharp, smelling of perfume, her lips pressed tight like she disapproved of the air itself. She had never liked Eleanor. Even when Charles was alive, Patricia had treated her like an outsider who did not deserve the Hartwell name. Patricia stood at Eleanor's window and watched Jake working in the yard. "Who is that man?" she asked, voice flat. "My ranch hand," Eleanor replied. Careful, Patricia's eyes narrowed. "He's enormous. Where did you find him?" "He came looking for work," Eleanor said. Patricia turned slowly. "How well do you know him? Have you checked him? A man that size could be dangerous." Eleanor's temper flared. "He's not dangerous. He's a good man." Patricia's smile was thin. "Is he? Because I've been in town. People are talking. They're saying a rich widow is keeping a young giant on her ranch." Eleanor's face burned. "That's disgusting." "Is it?" Patricia asked, soft and cruel. "You're alone out here. You have a fortune. People will make stories. You should fire him before it gets worse." That night, Eleanor walked to the bunkhouse with her heart pounding like she was heading into a storm. She knocked once. Jake opened the door fast, as if he had been waiting. When he saw her, hope flashed in his eyes. Then he caught himself and stepped back. "Mrs. Hartwell," quote, "We need to talk," Eleanor said. Inside, the bunkhouse was clean and plain. A bed, a small table, a few books stacked neat. It looked like the whole world of a man who owned almost nothing, but still took pride in what he had. "People are talking," Eleanor said, voice tight. Jake's face hardened. "Let them." "I can't," Eleanor whispered. "I have a name to protect, Charles's memory. His family is circling me like wolves." Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Are you firing me?" Eleanor closed her eyes. "I think it's best." The silence that followed felt heavy enough to crush. Jake nodded slowly, but his eyes looked wounded in a way Eleanor would never forget. "I understand," he said. Eleanor turned to leave, and her throat felt like it was closing. She reached the door, then Jake's voice stopped her. "What if there's another way?" he asked. Eleanor turned back, confused. "What do you mean?" Jake took a breath, then dropped to one knee again, right there on the worn floorboards. It was not a show, it was desperate, honest, like a man with nothing left to hold on to. "Marry me," he said. Eleanor's heart stopped. "Jake." "I know how it sounds," he said quickly. "I know I have nothing, but I love you, and I think you feel something too, even if you're trying to fight it." Eleanor's hands trembled at her sides. "This is insane." Jake looked up at her, eyes bright with pain and hope. "Then call me insane," he whispered. "But don't send me away because you're afraid of people who never cared if you were happy. Let me stay. Let me work for you as your husband. Let me give you a real life again. If you want a family, I want it too. I want to build it with you." The room spun. Eleanor thought of the months alone, the empty bed, the empty rooms, the way she had begun to breathe again since Jake arrived. "What will they say?" she whispered. Jake's voice broke. "Let them say it. I can take their words. I've taken worse. I just can't take losing you." Eleanor stared at him, at this huge man kneeling like he was not huge at all, offering his heart like it was the only thing he owned. She realized something in that moment that made her chest ache. Charles had been her past. Jake felt like a future she never planned, but suddenly could not live without. Eleanor swallowed, then let out a shaky breath. "Get up," she said softly. Jake did not move. "Not until you answer." Eleanor's eyes filled. "Yes?" she whispered. Jake blinked like he did not trust his ears. "Yes?" "Yes," Eleanor said again, and this time her voice was stronger. "I'm done living for everyone else." Jake rose slowly, and when he wrapped his arms around her, Eleanor felt safe in a way she had not felt since the day Charles died. His embrace was careful, gentle, like he understood her fear and would never use his strength to push her. They married in the courthouse in Billings with a justice of the peace and no crowd. Eleanor wore a simple blue dress. Jake bought a suit with his saved wages, and it hung on his large frame like it was made for him. They did not kiss for the world, they kissed for themselves. By the time they drove back to Meadowbrook, the phone was already ringing. Friends called, shocked. Some were kind, some were cold. Patricia called again and again, her voice sharp as glass. She said Eleanor had lost her mind. She said people were laughing. She said Eleanor was embarrassing the Hartwell name. Eleanor listened, then looked across the kitchen at Jake, who was making dinner with calm hands and quiet care. He glanced up and smiled, and it was not the smile of a desperate man anymore. It was the smile of a man who finally believed he belonged somewhere. Eleanor held the phone tighter and spoke into it with a steady voice. "Let them talk," she said. "I'm happy." The weeks that followed were not easy. Trucks slowed on the road. People stared in town. Some stopped inviting Eleanor to gatherings she never wanted to attend anyway. But inside the ranch house, life felt warm again. Jake moved through the rooms with respect, never acting like he owned anything except the promise he made. One morning, 3 months after the wedding, Eleanor stood in the bathroom holding a small test in her hand. Two clear lines stared back at her, and for a moment she could not breathe. Jake found her leaning against the sink, tears on her face. "What's wrong?" he asked, fear rising in his voice. Eleanor held up the test. Jake's face changed fast, from worry to shock to joy so bright it almost broke him. He dropped to his knees, not for begging this time, but from pure feeling. He pressed his forehead gently against her stomach, still flat, still quiet. "Thank you," he whispered, like he was talking to God and to Eleanor at once. Eleanor ran her fingers through his hair, her own heart full and trembling. Outside, the ranch stretched wide and calm, the same fences, the same fields, but everything felt different. That night, as the sun fell behind the hills, a coyote howled in the distance, and the sound rolled across the land like a warning and a blessing at the same time. Eleanor sat on the porch with Jake's arm around her, and she realized the truth. People might never fully accept them, Patricia might never stop trying to tear them apart, but Eleanor had stopped living for whispers. She rested her hand over her belly, and Jake covered it with his bigger hand, holding on like he would never let go. Then the phone rang again from inside the house, loud in the quiet, and Eleanor saw Jake's eyes tighten for a second. Whatever the next call brought, whatever storm waited on the road ahead, they would face it together.